Good afternoon, students. My name is Dr. Fangide, and I am welcoming you to the very first full week of your biology class. I have started grading your introduction, and I have enjoyed reading all about you guys and the background that you bring into the class, and the fact that some of you never liked biology in high school, and that's okay. I understand that. But I'm impressed by the fact that you are taking this class, and some of you are working full time, some of you are raising a family, and you choose to do this to invest in your future. So I think we are going to have a lot of fun. I'm excited about being on this journey with you, and I hope that you just come ready to learn. I want you to, every once in a while, go back to the tips for succeeding in an online class and stay on top of those tips, and I think you will do okay. Well, this week I am going to post your notes for chapters 1 and chapter 2. I'm going to need you to use my notes to fill in the blanks in your textbook. And the reason why I do this is that there is literature out there to back up the fact that when we read and write what we are reading, we tend to recollect it a lot more. It sticks to stick longer in our brains and makes it easier for us to remember it. And so the blanks in your notebooks are supposed to be used for you to fill in your notes. Every once in a while, I will ask you to take a picture of some pages and send it to me. Every once in a while, I'll ask you to maybe send a picture of a classwork that we have done or do the classwork on discussion boards, so just so everybody can have a chance to chime in and see what your thoughts are on the different subjects, okay? So I will post my notes for chapters 1 and 2. I will encourage you to read through those notes, use it to fill your own. But let's just begin. I want to talk to you for just a few minutes, and then I'll let you go, and I'll let you read your notes and ask your questions on Just Ask tab on discussion board. Okay, so here goes. Chapter 1 basically deals with what is science. And if we were sitting together, I would ask you and I would brainstorm. And in our face-to-face classes, we do this. We brainstorm and everybody gets the chance to answer that question, what is science? We won't get a chance to do that as a class, but I encourage you to think about it. If you were to define science, what would you define it as? And there's a lot of answers. Well, I've given you a definition for science in your textbook. And basically, it's the use of a systematic method to try to solve problems. Biology then as a science means you are using a systematic method, and you're using that systematic method to try to figure out how living organisms operate. So in chapter 1, I'm basically dividing that chapter into two. The first part of chapter 1 deals with what makes a study a science. What is science? The second part of it deals with what makes an organism a living organism. You tie that in together, biology is a science that deals with living organisms, with how those living organisms interact with each other and how those living organisms interact with the environment in which they find themselves. So, when we say that biology is a science, what we're basically saying is that biology uses a systematic method to investigate living organisms. Biology uses a systematic method. I want you to think about that for a minute. When something is done systematically, it means you're not doing it haphazardly. It means you're taking time and you're following a process. Well, that's what science is, a process of doing something. Now, that systematic process has a name, and the name is the scientific method. So the systematic process in which you study anything that is a science is called the scientific method. In your notes, I have told you that there are 7 steps of the scientific method that we're going to look at. Those 7 steps are observation. I want you to, as you read that in your notes, I want you to note the differences, the characteristics of each of these steps. So when you're talking about observation, how is observation different from merely looking at something? And I like to give a funny story. In our house, we live in a multi-level house, and we'd lived in this house for about maybe 5-6 years. So a few years ago, I just happened to ask my children, who were teenagers at the time, how many steps do we have between the mid-level, which is where the kitchen and the living room is, and the upstairs where the bedrooms are? Now, bear in mind, we'd lived in this house for 5 to 6 years. We climbed those stairs every day because we go up and down the stairs to go to the bedrooms, and we wake up and we run down the stairs. But we've been using these steps. But none of us had any idea how many steps there were. We see them, we look at them, we climb them, but we just don't observe. So observation means you pay close attention to what you're doing. You pay close attention. And so in science, the mere fact that you are observing means you are engaging in one of the methods of the scientific method. The very first one, you observe. A scientist doesn't just go through life. A scientist pays close attention to the things that they're engaging with in life. Okay, so when you observe, you're paying close attention. Sometimes you use things that will help your senses a little bit. So a scientist doesn't just look at the grass. A scientist may use a magnifying lens to look at the grass and really note things that are going on the soil where the grass is growing. That's observation. When you observe, it leads to the second step, which is questioning. Okay, when you observe, you're going to ask questions. So if we had noticed and observed the steps in our house, we would have asked questions like, how many steps are there? We would have asked questions like, I wonder if there are more steps leading from the living room to the bedrooms or leading from the living room down to the den. We would have said, I wonder why there are only 7 steps and not 12. Questions. Questions only come about when you are able to observe. Now, in science, it's important to note, and you have this in your notebook too, that questioning, you know how somebody always says there's no such thing as a bad question? Okay, in science, there really is a distinction between a good question and a bad question. A good question is a question that you can design an experiment to try to find the answer. A bad question is basically why questions. Because it's hard to design questions, to design experiments to answer a why question, okay? So an example that I like to use is in our house, we do cats, okay? So I don't know how many of you out there are cat people. I don't know if there's any of you that are dog people, but let's assume that you like cats like we do. So we have a cat and her name is Prissy. And if you were to observe Prissy, and you observe that Prissy likes 9 lives, you could ask a question. You've observed it and you come to our home and you notice that we give her 9 lives. When we run out, we get some more, and that's all Prissy eats. So you could ask a question, and the question would probably, there are a lot of different questions you could ask. So supposing you ask, why does Prissy like 9 lives instead of any other cat food out there? Why? I want you to think for a minute. Is that a question that you can design an experiment for? Why does Prissy like 9 lives cat food? Okay, write it down. Do you think, some of you are nodding your head, yeah, you could. Well, some of you are saying no. Well, how would I be able to find the answer to that? I could ask Prissy. I bet you she'll just say meow, which is what she says about anything, right? She won't be able to tell me the answer. So why question? But listen to another question. I wonder if Prissy, or does Prissy prefer 9 lives to Purina cat chow? So think of those 2 questions. First question is, why does Prissy eat 9 lives? Second question, does Prissy prefer 9 lives to Purina cat chow? If I asked you which of those 2 questions I could design an experiment for, do you think the second one would be a better one? Yeah. So I'm asking you, how would you do that? Well, very easily, and we'll talk about all the different parts of an experiment in a little bit. But basically, what would you do? You would give Prissy cat food. You would give her Purina cat chow in one bowl when she's really hungry, and you would put 9 lives in another bowl, and you would see which one Prissy goes to. So she would probably go sniff both of them and then make her choice. And you've answered your question. So what am I saying? In science, it is not just enough to observe. Observation leads to questioning. It is also important to ask the kind of questions that you can design an experiment for. Okay? So basically, why questions? But there's a lot of different kinds of questions that you could ask. Okay? So if you see plants growing outside, instead of saying, why do plants grow outside? You would ask a question, do plants that grow outside grow better than those that grow inside? Okay, see the difference between those 2? And then you could design an experiment, grow some plants inside, grow some plants outside, and then you would be able to draw your conclusion. So first step, observation. Second step, questioning. Third step, exploration. The basic premise for exploration is that there is no question you're going to ask in science that has not been asked in some form before. So what does questioning mean? I mean, what does exploration mean? Exploration simply means you're looking for answers. You've asked a question and you begin to look for the answers. Where do you look for the answers? There's a lot of different ways. You get on the World Wide Web and you Google, right? That would be one way. Not very scientific, but hey. Or you could read journal articles, or you could go to the dictionary. Go to the library, and you could look at journals. You could look at different books that have been written, and you're trying to find the answers. That's exploration. What have other people done before in this field that I could find an answer to? So we go back to the question of does Prissy. So we could generalize that question, and we could say, do cats prefer one type of cat food to another type of cat food? Or is it just what you give them that they eat? Do cats have a preference? So what would you do? Well, one of the things you would do would be begin looking for other people that have done research on cat food and cat's behavior. So maybe you go to a veterinary doctor and ask him for his veterinary magazines and start reading them. Or maybe go to an agriculture department where they do research on animals. But you start looking for answers. And you may find out that nobody really did research on cat food before, but somebody's done research on dogs and dog preferences. So based on that, you can now go on to the next step, which is forming a hypothesis, okay?